Hello, everybody. I'm Roman Tonkiv. Used to be a finance guy turned real estate professional, investor, and a hospitality manager. Welcome to the podcast Invest in Denver. And a quick giveaway, my famous, and the best place for Mediterranean food in Denver, it's Safta. It's this Israeli restaurant, so highly recommend it.
SAFTA. I've heard so many good things about that, man. What was your favorite dish over there? What'd you get?
I think there was like meatballs. They come in three pieces. I think it's a lamb meatballs. I mean, everything was great. The hummus was great. We had a salad. So yeah, highly recommend the play. But you want to make sure you get a reservation because that place books out and it's pretty busy.
I will say too that I've seen some pictures of SAFTA and the dishes that they have. It looks like art. I mean, on that dish. I mean, everything is presented so well, and I want to eat it up with my eyes. I start salivating even without even smelling the thing, you know?
Yeah, it reminds me of Spanish. Forget the name of it. It's like the tapas, right? Like you get these little portions. So it's basically a la carte. You pick whatever you want, but it's delicious. So highly recommend. That's my go-to play. I'm a huge Mediterranean food, so I can eat hummus every day.
Well, thank you so much for the recommendation, Roman. And I will definitely bring that up one more time as we talk about your fitness situation. But before we get into that, thank you so much for listening to the Invest in Denver podcast. Roman Tomkiv, it is a genuine pleasure to have you here. So, to get everyone warmed up with your situation, how you even got to the Denver area, I'm curious, maybe like a quick synopsis of how you even got to Denver. Where did you grow up, and what series of events led you to Denver in the first place?
Oh man, that's a loaded question, but of course, we're glad to share. So, quick background, I'll give you elevator pitch. Originally from Ukraine, I came to this country back in 2000, right after finishing high school. Spent a number of years on the East Coast. I went to college, Rutgers, undergrad finance, went to business school in Fordham University, worked in Wall Street for about a decade, and then before the COVID hit, I used to live in Charlotte. Kind of I left for for Charlotte, right? I think it was like the middle of 2019, right before COVID hit, and then COVID hit. I ended up working remotely, traveled a bunch. I think I traveled about 40 plus states altogether. Oh, not just during COVID, but in general. Yeah, and ended up somehow, I was driving by on my way to LA through Denver, went skiing, and then you know what? I love the place. The weather's beautiful, sunny, dry, great people, great food. So I like to call it Denver. It's California without an ocean, right? You have everything that you need. It's just no water, but I'm fine. I can deal with it. I can fly or drive to California. It's not a big deal. So that's how I ended up here. So this is home for now.
Love to hear it, man. I will say too, I totally agree with you that it feels like California, but without the ocean portion of it. And a lot of people pay a premium for that ocean view. And those people that actually live close to the ocean, maybe like hundreds of feet from the ocean, they pay that premium in terms of real estate and rent. But as far as Denver goes, you could see the mountains for miles and you could still like get that mountain experience no matter where you drive, like several miles out, not too far like you're in Kansas, but nonetheless, you get that sweet view when you're in the Denver area. So I feel like that's one big benefit of having the mountains versus the ocean, you know?
That's actually a good point. Yes, yeah, I'm totally in agreement with you. Yeah,
Yeah, except if you live in like Golden or Boulder or something like that, like that's when you pay the premium when you're that close to the mountains. That's a whole different subject. But
absolutely.
I guess going back to your East Coast ventures and your Charlotte living situation, I know you picked up some real estate along the way. With those investment properties over on the East Coast, where are they located and how many units are there?
So I kind of give you I did the house hacking before the house hacking kind of was mainstream. So I kind of picked up my first, it was a duplex. And again, going back to East Coast, there's just so many of them, right? I was in Stamford, Connecticut. So it feels like every second or third house either a duplex, it could be a duplex, right? Because I think the situation back when they're building out the East Coast, it's totally different than, for example, here in Denver. So my first one was back in 2017. Again, with a 3.5% down payment, it was like really, for $20,000, you get a $500,000 property, and that was a foreclosure, right? So that was a really kind of textbook, low money down, fixer upper type of thing. Yeah, I lived there for about a year, and then I moved to Charlotte, so I was able to sell it. And then as we were going through that, I got into commercial with some of my partners. We bought a mobile home park. And for those folks who are not familiar with that, it's basically we bought a little village, I like to call it. We had about 70 pads, 55 were occupied. So give or take, we were about probably 150 to 180 people living. So it was a kind of interesting dynamic, totally different than, just buying a duplex or a single family home. You're responsible for these people collecting rent, making sure they have safe and clean environment, neighborhoods, no violence, no crime. So it was definitely, and given all our partners lived in either in New York area or like Ohio, so obviously in the property we picked up, it was in North Carolina. So it was all along long distance.
Going back to your first property, the house hacking situation. I mean, we are very in tune with house hacking and what that looks like and what the numbers look like. But for those that are uninformed or just not knowledgeable yet, what is house hacking?
Well, I like to say that the idea behind it, it's you want to live for free. So it's either you buy a duplex, you live in one unit, or you rent the other one, or if it's not duplex, you live in one bedroom and rent the other room. So the idea is you collecting rent from other tenants and you're just paying down your expenses, being big as the mortgage. So I think that's kind of the idea, being a landlord in your own property.
And it's sort of like being a landlord on training wheels before you even started having investment properties and working on commercial. I feel like that might have been a good training grounds for you to understand what it's like to be a landlord, to manage properties, and ultimately generate wealth and fixate a business and work on a business. So, did you feel like that led you on to that commercial space a little bit easier than if you were to just go straight into commercial by itself?
No, absolutely. I think it's definitely, especially for people that had no experience in real estate, but they want to get in because, everybody's telling you that you need to get into real estate. Like that's kind of your little bit of a taste how it's gonna feel like, right? Like I remember one, I was back in, no, it was in Stanford. I think I went through maybe 30 or 40 people, like as a check in the property, applying. So that was a quite of experience. So, again, it was a great training before getting to commercial, see what people are applying, how they apply, what are they asking. Like obviously there were some people that are not really, they would just want to pay a year in advance. That's obviously a red flag. Some people had no, criminal or other background checks. So I would definitely recommend getting into, buying your own property and kind of going through that training before getting to a bigger stuff. Or if you get into bigger stuff, obviously with people that have experience and know what they're doing.
Yeah, and you coming from the finance space, especially working on Wall Street for a decade. I mean, I'm actually curious how that whole experience was. I mean, you hear the Wolf on Wall Street, the stock market brokers, the people on the trading floor, and that whole situation, and that seems extremely stressful, or maybe even fun, according to some people. But what was your
Oh,
experience like, and what was that like?
from outside, yeah, it was a gold glamour, right? Like I've seen the Wall Street, the first, and then the second one. Like, and I started my career literally 2008. For those folks that don't remember, it was basically a couple months. Like I graduated '08 from undergrad in May, and Lehman Brothers, went bankrupt on September 15th. So I was kind of right in the midst. So it was pretty scary, especially seeing all these 20, 30-year veterans working at that bank and they were done, right? And I think that was first kind of like red flag. Well, yeah, you go to college, you get a good education, go get a job, you make six figures, even, some people making high seven. But then one day, like this, and you're out on the street with a box of, pen and your badge ID, and that's about it. So I think that was kind of the first, like, well, there's got to be something else as far as, investing money into something that's more tangible and long lasting, and I have, pass it on to to my children. So I think that was definitely, in a way, looking for, there's got to be more, right? I think that was a big one for me. And especially as I kind of went through, maybe talk about, I'm a huge personal development, Tony Robbins guy. I went to his seminar in 2017. I don't know if you folks, it's UPW, it's Unleash the Power Within. So my big one was freedom. I wasn't free, right? Even was like, what do you mean not free? Well, yeah, I was working in a corporate job. Like I wasn't free. I was basically coming in every morning, punching in, punching out, and that was kind of day in and day out, day in and day out. And I was like, you know what? This is not what I signed up for. So that was as more like, okay, I gotta take more action. How do I substitute my income and get out of this kind of golden parachute scenario?
For sure. And I'm glad you mentioned that golden parachute because what I was about to say was sounds like golden handcuffs. You're just enslaved to this industry, to this position, to this salary. I mean, sure, it's very high paying, but you are in there. And I know a lot of people that have been in that industry that work weekends, work long hours. And maybe that's something that you saw as well. But it's the time freedom, it sounds like, that really drew you to that real estate portion and industry in general, where you're like, you know what? I kind of want passive income. I kind of want to have this time freedom. And the only way to get there, or I guess the easiest way to get there, is to start a business or in real estate or a combination of the two. Yeah.
Well, I think the big one, and I'm like still frustrated to this day. I went to undergrad, paid thousands of dollars. I went to the MBA, but nobody teaches that at school, right? There's
Mm.
no college, no university, not even, Harvard and Stanford. Like nobody talks about you can actually be financially free and not, go get a job and like hopefully you'll make money and then wait till you retire and then you can enjoy your life, right? And I think that's the biggest trap that nobody teaches. I think that was a huge for me. Like, oh man, I started learning about these podcasts, these real estate meetups, and I'm like, oh my God, these people are like, they can do whatever they want. I need to go and show up at 9 o'clock at work and work a whole day. These people don't have to do that, right? And I think it's not the money thing; it's the freedom of time, and you can't like time is priceless. So that's just another huge thing that you know took me out of that equation, chasing that ladder. I like that. There's a good saying, I think, make sure that that ladder is on the right wall because you could be climbing on the right, and when you ended up there, I'm like, oh my God, this is not where I was climbing. And then you're looking back 20, 30 years out, and you're like, what did I do? So I
Mm.
think that was kind of my big aha moment. Like, no, this is not the ladder that I'm climbing. I want to have my own ladder and figure out where I want to climb.
Yeah. I guess expanding on that a little bit more, how does one find the proper wall to put their ladder on? Is that wall geared towards your goals? How do I make sure that the ladder that I'm putting that wall on is the appropriate one?
I think trial and error, that's number one. And number two, I think you want to be really true to yourself, what you actually want, right? Not what you think you can get, right? Like, because that's based on your fears and all your, limited beliefs, but like, what exactly what do you want? Don't think about how is it possible or not, but just I wanted to be financially free, travel the world, kind of be my own boss on my own terms, right? It's kind of still not really clearly defined, but like that was the ultimate goal, and like try to figure out, okay, how can I get there? What kind of vehicles can get me there, right? Like, e-commerce, different businesses, real estate, all these different things, and then start to connect into people, going to meetups and like seeing what others are doing and finding who's doing what you want to do, and just like basically, hunt them down, talk to them, see what they do, how they did it. So that was, and even up to this day, when I talk to people interview, I'm like, know what you know now, what would you do differently, right? Like, I think it's the best question because everyone like, oh, I should have done this bigger, or I should have, buy real estate sooner. So I think that's, but again, there's no right answer. You just have to kind of do it, like talk to people, and it will come up, right? It will somehow, you'll figure out like, oh, wow, I enjoy, doing this. I enjoy not doing this.
I feel like you being such a proponent for personal development and a huge Tony Robbins fan, um, having resources such as books where people write their life stories, people write down the lessons that they've learned, the goals that they've accomplished, why they did something a certain way. Um, you're a huge proponent of that stuff. What are some books? I mean, I feel like I'm jumping the gun a little bit here, but I'm curious, since we're on the subject already, what certain books would you recommend to people that I don't know, just want to better themselves in general? I mean, maybe a Tony Robbins book might be up your alley.
So I think I'm a big proponent, like the books are, it depends where you're in your life, right? So for example, the one big one for me that kind of gave me that push to leave my, corporate job, it was a cash flow quadrant. So for folks, it's Robert Kiyosaki. I know everybody talks, about a rich poor dad poor. I'm actually, yeah, it's a good book, but I think the cash flow quadrant, there's a four different categories, right? Like the left side, I think it's the employee and the self-employed, and the right side, it's the investor and then the business owner. Yeah, so the second one is Who Not How. I think it's by Dan Sullivan. And again, this is a book that helps you to scale, to basically leverage your team, leverage your other resources, and not kind of thinking how I'm going to get there, how I'm going to do that, but basically, who can help me get there? And I think perfect example, I like to always sports and athletics because it's just so easy to relate. For example, if you want to run a marathon, okay, obviously, yes, how I'm going to do it, but who can help me get there? Obviously, you get a coach, and then coach can write you a program and keep you accountable. That's basically, if you think about that book, that's in a nutshell. You want to have people around you that help you how to get there because they're going to bring their experience, they're going to bring their accountability, and they're going to keep you accountable for moving every day toward your goal.
Oh, that's brilliant. I know with all this business talk and especially with cash flow quadrant, you're on the investor side, at least at this point in your story. But I know that you're also in that B, that business side where you started a business. What is the name of your business and what do you do with that business?
Awesome. Well, so it's a hospitality. I know people talk about short-term rental, but I like to say I'm in hospitality business. It's we basically, rent properties for, I mean, I have my own property and for our partner owners, to people that take vacations, especially out in Colorado mountains. And the name is Haus Management. The reason I named it, I was because I own a property up there. It's almost 11,000 feet elevation, and the view is some days you can only see the skies. And it just came to me, well, why not, sky house? I'm in a sky house, so it kind of came. But the house, it's a German Haus, so it's a little bit unique than just the American way of saying house. Yeah, it's a hospitality. I love that. We're you know if you think about it, like statistically, every American family they can either afford one or two vacations per year. So it's really dear to their hearts. I want to make sure that we can provide the best service we can do for them because they saving up the whole year and just coming out for probably a couple of days or a week, spending that time. So we'll make sure we can do the best we can so they can have great time, basically year round. Summer's busy for us, but winter is the most busiest given we're in the mountains.
For sure. And did you see a demand for managing these short-term rentals, vacation homes, prior to you starting this business?
Well, yes, I kind of started as I was still in Charlotte, more like, Airbnb, looking at how can I maximize my return. And actually by accident, because I lived in a duplex, I lived on one side and then I was renting the second side. And my tenant, long-term tenant left, and I had a hard time finding a new long-term tenant. I think went through like 30 or 40 people. And then one of my buddies, he reached out to me. He's like, hey, by the way, our mutual friend, she was doing so-called arbitrage, right? She would just rent long-term an apartment, and then she would do as a short-term rental, put in like Airbnb, VRBO. It was like, hey, would you consider, renting to her? I'm like, of course, as long as she pays me the rent. I mean, I don't really care what she does with it. And that's kind of, almost 4 years fast forward. I'm in it because I'm looking at it as obviously from the return perspective, but I enjoy providing the service. Whenever I still read all the reviews, I get a kick out of people, put 5 stars. They're really excited. They, happy with the design, happy with the stay and everything. So it's definitely, I want to say I found my niche and I found my, kind of fulfillment. I enjoy doing that. And especially, I think it's one of the industries that all the stakeholders' interests are aligned, right? If you think about it, if you're a property owner, you want to maximize your rental income. Obviously, you want to make sure your property is in the best shape. As a guest, you coming in, you want to make sure that the great time. And then as a property manager, you want to make sure all these people, have same goals. And that's because the more money property makes, the more money I make, and the better property as far as, maintenance and all that appreciation. So everybody wins in this scenario.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. And it's kind of nice to. I'm also in the short term rental space for those of you curious. And Roman has definitely helped me out with getting it set up. And I am, or I guess previously to that home, I was a long term renter guy. I had a brief stint in Airbnb in the San Diego area, but quickly switched over to the long term rental situation just for the stability and the management of it. For the people that are curious with what it's like managing a short term rental, is it as hard as people seems? I mean, you get a lot of guests coming in and out of the property. I mean, you're bound to have something destroyed, right?
So I like to say it's not for everybody, right? You want to come in and do this with the right mindset and the right goals, right? I think people are, if they think it's a quick buck, you can automate everything, put an Airbnb and just kind of set it and forget it. Obviously, that's not going to work because two, three bad guests, and obviously, it's all relative, right? Like people lose patience. Oh my God, I can't do this anymore. I can't deal with these guests, and then they leave bad review, and that's it, and they're out of business. And another piece, obviously, I like to say that every property could be a long-term rental, but not every property could be a short-term rental, right?
Hmm.
So that's a huge factor where that property is located. Do you have any views? If you can design it nicely. So there's a lot of different things, but I think the number one, every investor slash operator, they have to ask themselves, what's my end goal, right? Like, if it's the money, well, it's going to be tough, right? Because if you're not, there could be some weeks or even month you're not, you might not even breaking even. But some month that you're like crushing, you're making 3, 4, 5, 6x your normal, right? So if you're looking to gain, money, you're probably not gonna like stick around because you're not making money. Your goals are not met, right? So I think ask yourself, is this like I really want to help people provide the service, be it in the hospitality business, or I just want to make quick bucks? So maybe a long term would be a better solution. You kind of literally set it and forget it. Either do it yourself because it's not as management intensive, or just find a long-term property manager for 8, 7, or 10%, and then be truly passive.
And I will say that when I started my short term rental, and like I said, thanks to you and your applications that you recommended, which I would like to go to in the future, it is as hands off as possible. There's a lot of components where I don't have to intermingle with the guests. I mean, sure, if they have an inquiry, there's some automated responses and things like that. But at the same time, there's some portions of it where I don't have to worry about the day to day happenings. How do I make it as systematized as possible? And how do I make it as easy as possible for me to, I don't know, set it and forget it? I mean, obviously, it's not going to be a cash cow where I'm not doing anything, but it does take some systematizing in order to make it as passive as possible. Yeah.
Again, I think it depends on the market, right? So, for example, I'm in the mountain market, and then the expectations are a little bit higher because people coming in with families, right? They look for places to shop, eat, and hike. So what I found is they want to be more in communication with you, and they feel more welcome. Then I don't know if you probably stayed in one of those Airbnb that everything's almost feels like it's a robot, right? You get
Mm.
automated this, then it's all like pure like you can tell it's automatically generated, right? So that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's probably more in the urban setup when the expectations are lower, right? If you're in, I don't know. I remember traveling in Atlanta. It's pretty much you go into this tall, apartment building, you pick up a key and go in like you don't really ask anything and you don't expect anything. So, but like on a more higher end, truly vacation spots, like people expect a higher service, and even some places, they have a concierge. So I think it all again goes back to that goal of what you want your property to be. If you really want to automate and everything, it's all there's a ton of different property management systems you can do that. And then obviously the big one would be a cleaner. So you want to make sure you have that lined up because I like to say without cleaners there's no business, right?
Mm.
You kind of screw up one or twice, and then your reviews are suffering and your listings are not doing great.
For sure. And what kind of clients do you have? Do you mainly work in the Rockies, or are you a national management business? Where are your clients right now?
So no, I'm focusing on like Park County. If you focus like outside of Breckenridge, so it's basically it's I would say 90 to 95% it's all second homeowners, folks, with some investors. So these are primarily, your Front Range Denver owners or people in out of tech. We have a lot of Texas people, some Californians like Chicago. So these folks they come in probably 2, 3, 4 weekends per year, but the rest of the time they're not there. So those are my clients, and they understand, right? They know how it works. They've kind of been there. They know how it feels to come from like a long, a quarter or 2 quarters of work and come and enjoy their stay. Totally different than your drive-by Denver, Airbnb person comes in to 2, 3 nights. Kind of, they don't really, stay in the house. But these people, they actually want to be in the house. They just want
Mm.
to be secluded, look at, the snow. There's like wildlife. They want to be in the house. So you want to make sure you have everything that they need in the property, hot tub. I have one of the property have sauna, so that's like, why do you want to leave? Especially when it's like 20 below. Like people come and they want to hang out in the house.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And with typical short-term rental property management businesses, they're so used to like I don't know, having that automated process where, like you said, that urban area, it makes a lot more sense having that automated messaging, and they just want to be left alone and not have that like, hey, I'm here for you whenever you want. It seems kind of almost intrusive on their experience, right? But when you're dealing with like a mountain town or having a cabin or something like that, it makes a lot more sense to hire Skyhouse Management, where you have a hot tub, you have an experience in the mountains rather than just like I don't know, like a robotic feel to it. So it feels much more personal in that regard. So, with that being said, I mean, when you mentioned having a couple quarters of work and then going out to the mountains, you kind of want to let loose a little bit. And short term rentals and vacation homes are, I guess, they have this bad rap of like, short term rentals equals parties equals bad, right? And a lot of people associate short term rentals with that situation, but I don't always find that to be the case. What's your insight on that? Where having parties at these short term rentals, does it seem to have an effect on the neighborhood?
I think it's definitely more in urban, right? Perfect example. I was just what was it, 2 days ago? We were well, I wouldn't say, yeah, we called the cops, like one of my properties in Charlotte, because they had the guest, she went to like a soccer game and her team won, and then I think it was like a high school, and they obviously all after the game they came to the property, whereas she was the only one she booked. It was a 3 bedroom she booked. It's a one person booking, but then you have 20 people, right? So you can't have that.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like a party, but it was when they were just hanging out there, and you can't do that. It was like 1 o'clock at night on the residential street. So I see that more common in the urban space, given that people can pretty much travel freely, right? It's not like you're gonna go to the mountains an hour and a half, like just out of the blue. So, and the majority of the people are families, right? And obviously, we all ran to the party that are 24 or older. So, or even if they have a party, the homes are kind of far away from one another. So it's
Mhm.
not, it doesn't really, it doesn't really do anything to the community. So I'm actually, mountains, and a lot of the times people expect that mountains are more, louder. People come there for vacation. So I think the issues are in the urban markets when you have a Airbnb, like a short-term rental property next to the neighbor needs to get up tomorrow, go to work, but then you have a party, right? That's where the issue starts. It's
Yeah.
not so much in the mountains, because again, everyone either tourists themselves or they just don't live there because they're not there. They don't care.
100%. No, that's really good insight. And I guess it does make sense when your neighbors are like several hundred feet down the street. It's a little bit different in the mountain areas versus like urban, where they're maybe like 20 feet away from you, where parties, if people go outside and the music starts blasting, it makes a huge difference in the neighborhood. Then you get this bad rap, and newspapers are saying, like, hey, short term rentals are bad. Why would you want to decrease the value of your neighborhood based on having Airbnbs closer to you? And I'm noticing too that Airbnbs are really shutting down the whole party aspect of it. I know they're pushing more of like that experience feel, being out of the house and enjoying your time in the city itself or in the mountains. Is that something that you see as well, where Airbnb is gearing more towards like better hosts and better experiences rather than, hey, this is a party house, go ahead and book it?
Well, see, that's kind of, I've been with a lot of industry folks arguing. I wouldn't say arguing, but more advocating is there is a big rap on like hosts, right? Like, oh, it's a bad host, it's a bad host. Like, but I think there's a lack of education, a lack of advocacy on being a good guest, right? Like, Airbnb or Airbnb, although they all really so centric on a guest, right? They kind of, if something happens, they might just shut you down and then figure out what happened, like as a
Mm.
host, right? They're not going to do that to a guest. So I think that there's need to be more work done of educating guests. Hey, you need to be respectful to this property, and not just do this. But it's it's kind of like the cliche, customer's always right. I think that's the
Yeah.
wrong mindset. And I think that's what these big, OTAs and being online travel agencies are doing, because they just want to collect the fees and then kind of put all the responsibility on the host. And then if you're a bad host, we're just going to shut you down
Mm.
and kind of do nothing to a guest. And then especially just recently, one of my guys from Mastermind, they had a party. Obviously, he kind of kicked him out, and then they wrote the whole bad review to Airbnb saying that he had like cameras in the private, in like bathrooms, like basically lied, and they shut it down his listing literally the next day. And now
Oh,
he needs to do
wow.
all the basically he needs to prove his innocence. You know what I mean? So it's all the opposite versus okay, let's figure out. Even though he showed all the communication, which was horrible from the guest. He showed where the cameras are, all this good, but they just shut it down because it's their policy. Because again, guest is always right. So going back to your question, I think there's needs to be more work done to educate. Hey, you guest, you need to make sure you're being a good guest, not just oh yeah, let's go party that Airbnb. If we get kicked out, who cares? There's no responsibility because
Mm.
Airbnb doesn't hold them accountable. There's no really like if you book direct, right? I can keep your credit card as for damages. That's different versus Airbnb. It's really more relaxed. So that's an issue. Again, if we're talking, and I think everyone talks about Airbnb like it's like the whole industry. No, it just happened to be one platform, but short-term rental, vacation rental space is so much bigger than Airbnb, but I think we all keep used to saying Airbnb because we all use it, and it's a huge generator for bookings at this point.
Yeah, for sure. And especially if you think about how much of the market it holds, it's just become such a household name where it's almost like considering permanent markers as Sharpies. You just call it a Sharpie, or like tissues as
Kleenex,
Kleenex,
right?
you
Oh,
know?
Kleenex.
Yeah, it's like the brand marketing. They're really good at like they started the whole thing, or at least according to my calculations, which already shows you that like that's how much of a hold Airbnb has on the industry. So that's something to be said about that. So I will say, like on the sake of time, Roman, I know you're not just a business guy and you're not just an investor. You also, well, I guess you're an investor in your own fitness and in your own health. I want to make sure that people understand that about you, where like there's a component about each person that I like to uncover. And I know you being an Ironman competitor and triathlon goer, if you will. I mean, most people wouldn't even dream of like putting yourself through that kind of stress, especially like physical stress, mental stress, and that whole preparation prior to that competition is a battle with your own will and diet and fitness in general. So, what even made you want to become an Ironman and do this stuff?
So now you were saying that and almost like, oh my God, did I put myself through stress? But I guess it is, right? And yeah, and I'm not full Ironman. I'm actually doing my full race and coming up in November. I did like four halves and I ran like two marathons. So I guess technically I could be, approaching that. Well, I think, like I said earlier, I think that with sports, it's the easiest way to collect those wins, right? Like, let's say you run a 5K, boom, you feel great, you accomplished something. You ran a 10K and like prepping and being religious with your trainings, I think it gives you all that kind of stamina and boost and discipline in all the other areas of your life, right? Being a business or, you know, sticking, being persistent, right? Business especially, there's a lot of things you do and you see no result and like, why am I doing this? Could be similar with sports. You keep running and training, but like nothing's happening until you actually go do that race. But that could be 3, 6, 9, or even 12 months out. So it's easy to lose kind of focus if you
Mm.
don't have that kind of goal in mind or end. I'm like, okay, I'm training for something.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think in business it's more again you have those goals. I'm like, I'm doing this because I want to get there, or I'm, helping people out or doing that service.
And like the actual training portion of it is one thing, but the diet portion, I believe, is the hardest portion of it, where it's not just like, yeah, I'm physically adept to do this stuff, but eating clean or getting the proper amount of calories in your body when you don't feel like eating, or when your trips to the grocery store is now forever changed until that competition. Was there anything significant that you did in your diet to better prepare you for it?
Well, I would say habits. I know we all habits, right? Like we're just combination of habits, but uh, changing and then sticking to it, and then basically your body will tell you, right? So, for example, if you're eating too much meat, you want to like pause for a little bit. But again, getting a coach, and I think as you start training, your body will basically tell you what you want. You'll feel like, oh man, I need this or I want that. From that perspective, like for example, I barely eat like bread, right? Like I just and it's been, probably years now. Salads and fish. Yeah, it's just more, again, you need to get into the habit. And again, perfect example, why people eat, greasy or fast food, because they're used to it, like their body just craving, because again, your body is just a habit. As you switch, and the best way to replace bad habits is to replace with good habits. So, for example, and it's slow. You can, you don't have to do it drastically. You can switch, instead if you're not eating salad, maybe start eating salad 2 or 3 times a week, and like do that for like 2 or 3 weeks, and then see how you feel, and then you kind of stick to it, and then implement something new, drinking more water. Um, it's again like with business, like I think you want to first figure out what you want. Okay, I want to get that race. Sign up for that race and start kind of training for it, and then your body will adjust. And then obviously stick and stay into it, not like once and done, but like basically changing your whole lifestyle. I think that's what.
Mm.
And then as years go by, you just this is kind of what I do. This is a person like, oh yeah, of course I do this. Like I've been doing it for years now.
Yeah.
And I think that's what people underestimate. Like awareness is number one. Like realizing, okay, these are the habits. Okay, this is why I'm doing. Like right, I think that's number one. And like, oh wow, okay, I'm doing this. Yeah, I know I'm doing this. Maybe I can't change it now, but as long as you understand that you're doing it, you can do something about it.
Mm.
But a lot of people they just don't realize. Like perfect example. Do you know when you tie your shoelaces? Do you tie your right first or left first?
Personally, I guess I'd tie my right first. Yeah, now that I think about it.
Right? See, we don't even think about stuff like that. Same thing with food, water. We do like we're just on autopilot. But if you kind of step back, pause, I'm like, okay, why am I eating this chocolate or why am I doing this? I'm like, okay, do I need do am I do I really want this or I'm just doing it because I used to doing it? Like perfect
Mm.
example, people eat like bagel for breakfast. I'm like, why? Do you really want bagel? You like crave bagel? Or you just do it because you've been doing it for like a decade now. So it's all these combinations, and you're like, oh my God, I mean, I've been doing all this stuff. Like it's bad for me, but I'm not even thinking about it because I've been accustomed doing like, eating Oreos like in elementary school, and I'm still eating Oreos, but why? Well, because it's a habit now.
Yeah, it's something you're familiar with. It's easy, it's easily accessible. It makes so much sense in that regard where your diet is a habit forming situation and it definitely becomes part of your lifestyle. And maybe that's why people that do Ironmans or even halves or marathons or whatever, they stay doing that lifestyle and they stay doing these Ironmans because they're already physically adept to it and they're like they can't see their body going in any other direction than up. And it feels like their body is at a higher plane and it just feels good to do these things. So it makes a lot of sense in retrospect. And now that I'm thinking about this stuff and what you're putting your body through is overall a positive experience, in my opinion. Of course, maybe when you're older, you might do something that's a little bit lower impact than running 26 miles, but nonetheless, like that swimming portion of it and cycling, I feel like that's a little bit more, it stands the test of time in the end. So that's really good, man. If anyone were to try to do these triathlons or half Ironmans or Ironmans, um, where should they go to, I guess, hold themselves accountable as far as like maybe fitness groups in the Colorado area, Denver area, or a coach that you might recommend? Where could they start that whole accountability process?
Oh, then Denver, I would definitely join. It's called RM Tri. It's Rocky Mountain Tri Club. It's like it's really nothing. It's like $75 I think per year, and there's there's a list of workouts, and it's again we do bike rides from as small I think as like 20 miles to like we just did one in Saturday was like 70 miles. So definitely, yeah, definitely join the group of people that are already doing it. And again, it's not just sports with anything like masterminds and meetups. Just join a group and start, there's a good saying, right? Before you run, you need to walk. So just go run a mile and then run two, run three, sign up for a local 5K. You don't have to do it. I know some people do it. Oh my God, I'm going to do Ironman. All right, I'm going to do it. And they train for 6 to 9 months and they do it and then they never do it again. I mean, and then it's almost like, oh yeah, there you go, I did it, and you just show everybody. But like, did you benefit from it? Well, maybe, but if you're going back to where you were, you didn't really benefit. Like, if you
Hmm.
keep doing the thing you were doing before you did the Ironman, like, this is not the whole point of like prove something to somebody. It's just your lifestyle, and it's going to benefit you for the rest of your life as long as you keep training, keep doing these things. So I'm kind of looking from that perspective, just being as a long term same with business, right? Like, oh yeah, let me go run and do earn $1 million. You can go do some sales. And then if you, okay, I'm done. I proved the point, but like, it's not the point. Like the point of us to grow, and kind of expand our comfort zone and do all these cool things, new experiences. So yeah, that's kind of my view on that.
I love it, man. No, it's something to change yourself for the better. I feel you on that. Mentally, I'm not there yet. I have other goals in mind, but nonetheless, that's not to say that I won't be doing it sometime in the future. But the thought of being a quote unquote Iron Man is kind of cool. I'll be honest. It's almost like a title and a lifestyle at the same time. So stoked on it, man.
Well, it's the process, right? I think it's the journey to get there. It's not, some people think it's like success. Success is the journey. Like it's not like you get up one morning, oh, I'm successful. Like, it's same thing
Mm.
with that. It's a journey. Like you want to enjoy it as you get there because once you cross that finish line, it's okay, done that, been there. Like what else, right? But that whole year or whatever, 6 months you were training, that's the juice. That's like, getting up, you don't want to get up, going when it's raining outside. Like that's building character. So kind of like in business, if it's not working out, I'm like, you're doing cold calls, no response. I'm like, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? Should I just quit? It's again, same idea. But I think with sports, it's just so well, I wouldn't say easier, but it's just more clearly defined.
Mm.
Like, hey, you need to run a mile. Go do that. Like it's almost like robotic.
Yeah. You have a clear goal and a defined winner loser threshold. And if you accomplish it, you're a winner. And I feel like that's something about the whole sport and that I guess draws a lot of people as well. So I feel you on that.
Yeah,
So
finish. Like I know, like people, I'm a
yeah.
fan. Yeah, it feels great. I've accomplished something.
Yeah, you finished it. Well, Roman, thanks so much for even hanging out with me and tell about your story, triathlon, sky house management, and all that good stuff. But before I let you go, I'm curious if you had any questions for me. I like to turn the tables back onto me with you holding the mic.
Of course, you're kind of helping me. So, what are your goals? You just mentioned like being Iron Man at school, but what's your kind of North Star? Um, what makes you tick? What fulfills you?
For sure, man. No, I'm glad you asked. My goal is to retire in 6.5 years before I'm 40. That is the biggest thing. Living frugally ish as possible. I know with house hacking, you can get to one side of the spectrum where you're living behind a sheet and in a part of a living room like Craig did to get as maximum cash flow as possible. But at the same time, like I do want to live life at the same time, and I want to experience the world in my 30s with my wife, Kat, and my dog, Archie, and just go to different parts of the world. That's the ultimate goal. I mean, to be honest, we've only explored what, like 1/100th of a % of Earth. There's so much more to the world to even experience, and cultures and languages and food. And that's my big thing is time freedom, which we mentioned earlier in the podcast, and to get financially independent, which leads to that traveling, the food experiences, and I love my food. So it's all part of that process. So that's my North Star for sure.
So when you say retire, like is it just more travel, like right? Because honestly, I'm not a big fan of that retirement because it feels like I'm a big believer if you're not growing, you're dying type
Mm.
of thing, right? It's not like you're gonna lay on the beach and just do nothing. So just want to clarify, is that what you mean by just not? Are you saying not working, or what do you mean by that?
Yep, I feel you. I still want to be a real estate agent. I feel like this is a long time coming, and this is something that I enjoy doing for sure, especially seeing like first time home buyers realizing that they can go to the closing table for a $900 check for themselves and closing on a property that will generate them income and live for free. That spices me up. I mean, I love that aspect of it. And being an educator, I love talking and continuing on with the podcast and letting people know that there's more to life than just your W 2 job, your salary. only having 2 weeks of vacation for 40 years of your life. That makes no sense to me. And there's way more to life than living 2 weeks of the year in a vacation home doing whatever you want. Why not make that half of the year? Why not make that whenever you want? Having that time freedom of it. So, to answer your question, I want to be an educator, more specifically, financial independence or financial literacy in community college. I feel like that's where my life changing moments happened. I spent 7 years in community college and I loved the professors and the experience there, even though it took me forever to do it. So I don't want to just be laying on the beach. I want to get other people to that financially independent situation. Even if they happen to do it before me, I would rather us go at our own pace and figuring it out and figuring ourselves out along the way. So that's the big plan.
So I mean, like I said, everyone asked this, like, know what you know now, what would you do differently? As
For
far
sure.
as, I know you're in San Diego or like in Denver. Like, would you change anything? Would you do anything differently?
Yeah, I think the biggest part of that question is knowing what I know now. Knowing what I know now about house hacking, I would immediately house hack, especially looking at down payment assistance programs, having a couple cousins like pitch in with me to live in the same house or find some college students to live with me. I mean, when I was in Santa Cruz over in the Bay Area, I was living with like four other people. And I was like, how much is this landlord making? Like, this makes no sense to me that I'm paying this much for like a single bedroom in a dorm, whatever. And yeah, it's all about like getting yourself up and learning this game as soon as possible because real estate is a buy and wait game and buy and hold game rather than a get rich quick scheme. It all makes sense to me. The tax codes a lot for this stuff. The government wants you to do this and own property. And that all makes sense to me now. I just wish I knew it 10 years earlier when I was like 21, 22 at the time.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. And I guess lastly, how did you guys meet with your wife, with Kat?
Thank you for asking this stuff. This is why I love turning the mic back onto the guests. This is good. Actually, Kat and I met back in second grade. We went to the same elementary school, but we were not friends with each other. If anything, I did not. I was not friends with her at all. It was funny. One of our first interactions was she lived a couple blocks down from me from my San Diego home, my family home, and she asked me for my number for someone else who liked me at the time. So she hardly knew of me at the time, and I played pranks on her, not because I really liked her at the time, but nonetheless, we were friends of friends, and we didn't really reconnect until college, where the power of Facebook and videos at the time. I won't get into the specific video that I was in, but we reconnected with that video and music that we shared interests with, and the rest is history. So that was back in 2012, and we've been together for about 10 years. Yeah.
Nice, nice. That's good. And
Yeah.
looks like you guys have the same goals, right?
And that's the biggest thing too. And maybe I'd like to have someone else on here that can speak to like trying to get your partner on board or something like that. But she definitely sees the power of real estate and how quickly that can get us into that financial independence, financial freedom realm. How much passive income can we get per month? Can that cover our living expenses? Great. Now we can work whatever job we want and not have to worry about money. That's the biggest goal for us right now. It's just a matter of establishing ourselves, making sure that we're doing the right things financially speaking, investing in the right things, and she understands it completely, which I am very, very grateful for sure.
Yeah, no, that's important, right? You want to have that partner that understands you and you're making sure you're sailing in the right direction together.
100%, man. Well, I can wrap it up if you don't have anything else for me, Roman. No pressure.
Yeah, very good. It's been a
Nice.
pleasure.
So, no, dude, it's been a pleasure. So knowing about your story and knowing about Sky House Management, let's say if someone wants to get in contact with you, ask certain questions, or maybe even work with you, how does someone reach out to you?
Well, it's skyhousemanagement.com. That's a website for our company. And then they can find me at Roman Tonkiv. I'm on social. So yeah, it's easy to find me.
And just to remind you guys, it's SKYHAUS management.
Correct. Yes.
Yes, which gives it that exotic flavor. I love it. As for me, I am at ian.realestateagent. I'm on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. I upload weekly videos in terms of how to house hack certain properties, what the properties look like, rent by the room situations, short-term rental situations, long-term rental situations, everything. And I'm trying to cover it all. So definitely check me out on YouTube. With that being said, thanks for hanging out with the Invest in Denver podcast, and I'll talk to you guys later.